Hi there, and welcome to another one of my classic reviews where I pick one of my all-time favourite movies, give it a rewatch and then come review it. And in this video I'm talking about A Brighter Summer Day, which is a film that someone in the comments asked me to look at, and that is one of my all-time favourites, like top tier all-time favourites. I thought I should give it a rewatch and check it out and again and just analyse it for this video. And A Brighter Summer Day is just a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest films ever put together, and it's a really inspired work. So A Brighter Summer Day is 4 hours long. It's a long film, but it's like a truth epic. It's so epic, it's like an epic of reality. It touches on so many ideas. Its themes are really broad, but it's really intimate and specific to its era, and yet at the same time everything about it is universal. It's a fine example of new Taiwanese cinema, which is a movement in the 80s and 90s, and it's directed by director Edward Yang, who is best known for his later work E.E., which I think is a fantastic film also, one of my other favourites. So A Brighter Summer Day is amazing. A Brighter Summer Day is a quiet movie. It's filled with loads of still images and loads of moments which are quietly placed. It's not a film that's loud and out there. It's very subdued. It's a film with muted themes that remain in the background and only really come to the surface when you consider them. In fact, for the most part, it's a very human story, and we get loads of shots of things which just are framed within frames. The cinematography is kind of like the camera's hidden away sometimes. We see through open doorways, we see cameras linger on doors and walls while the conversation happens off screen. We see the camera fit between the gaps. We have shots of people looking through windows into distances. We have all this stuff which keeps A Brighter Summer Day totally stepped back from the story it's telling. It's kind of an objective film in the sense that it tells its story without really getting as up close and personal with its characters. It plays it in a way which is very, very detached, but at the same time not emotionless. It's not an emotionless look at the world. It's a movie that implores us to care about these people with a little bit of detachment to it. And its themes and its scope are magnificent. It really touches on so much across its epic runtime, despite the fact that the story is relatively small scale and just involves a school and kids and adults and the gang warfare of the time, followed by a long family drama. In fact, it's a film of two halves. It starts off as a film about gangs and later on becomes a film about family and about identity. So the first thing to say about A Brighter Summer Day is that it's really, really pertinent to its setting. Because although it is made in Taiwan in the 90s, it's set in the Taiwan in the late 50s, early 60s, which is an era when a whole bunch of people who had left communist China had moved to Taiwan. And that led to a generation of children who were the children of these immigrants who are in a kind of life with no form and no identity. They're not in the place they're meant to be. They're in a country that is their adopted home. They're not really anywhere where there's social cohesion. The whole society is falling apart in little ways. And so the characters here struggle to find who they are amongst the turmoil. The political situation is emphasised all over A Brighter Summer Day. We get shots of the family who were now middle class now riding a creaky bus as tanks go down the street next to them. We get emphasis on the authoritarianness of the state in A Brighter Summer Day. We get strict teachers, strict directors. We get the political situation, which plays out massively in the film in little ways, and we have a whole section to do with an interrogation, which is very authoritarian and very, very oppressive. And I think this draws back to something the film also touches on, because the children in the film, although they don't partake in the authoritarian politics of the adults, partake in their own politics, the gang culture around them. Just like with the adults, they face similar dilemmas. They don't know which side they're meant to take. They end up being tribal because they pick a gang, they pick a side. They don't really know what's going on, and they end up being oppressed or being treated one way or the other based on their politics. In fact, one thing that the film really emphasises is how the adult life and the children's lives are pretty much the same. They both are involved in deep social politics that shapes everything around them. They're different, and obviously they're distinct, and yet the children are not seen as being worse than the adults. And I think particularly we see how the adult world is no more caring than the children's world. The children's world in this film is just as political and just as difficult to navigate. And I think this is something that the film draws on. The longer the film goes on, the more those two worlds collide, and the more the adult and children's world become the same. Because I think Yang is making a point here about just how much turmoil there was in Taiwan at this time. And I think this extends also broader to something that Yang touches on in other films of his, because it's about how family and different generations all go through the same problems, even though on the surface the problems appear different. They actually suffer through the exact same turmoil and the exact same difficulty. Another key theme in this film is to do with lying and honour and loyalty, and how those things intermerge. There's a line in the film about how someone who would apologise for wrongs they didn't commit is capable of terrible things, which at first seems quite like it's important to the film, considering where the film eventually takes us. But actually, that line seems disingenuous actually. It doesn't actually come across as the reality of the film. Because in fact, the thing that leads to the downfall of the main character is not that he's able to acknowledge wrongs he didn't commit and lie. It's that he never learns to apologise, he never learns to lie. The film has a main character who becomes obsessed with honour in a weird way. Never explicitly, but it's quite clear that what he cares about is truthfulness, about staying honourable to himself. He cares about people being loyal to him, and about betrayal, and about people sticking by him and being what he wants them to be. He doesn't like to lie, which is why he ends up in all sorts of provocative situations where he provokes the ire of the gangs around him. He constantly gets angry when people dishonour him, and he constantly gets caught in these conflicts because he refuses to back down. So, although there's a certain benefit to being honourable in A Brighter Summer Day, the lead character himself seems unable to cope with that, and his honour seems to be what actually takes him down in the end, and what takes down other characters along the way. We see this also emphasised in the lead character's father, who lives an honest life, but that has only brought him enemy and poverty, which he then sees as dishonourable. When he's interrogated, he loses his honour, and the state seems to view him as someone who's dishonourable, expecting loyalty from him. And loyalty and truthfulness seems to be what they expect to be honourable. And the lead character himself applies this to his love interest, Ming, and he also applies it to other parts of the film. He applies that to other characters, and those who don't give him loyalty or truthfulness, he sees as enemies, he sees as problems. And that doesn't work in a world with such gang violence, with such terrible events. Being truthful and honourable does not always help. And the film shows us ways that lies can be good. Lies are used to protect people, lies are used to help shape identity, lies are used to make people who they want to be. The fact that the lead character is unable to lie shows that in the end, he's unable to learn to apologise and negotiate. And so that is why he ends up doing what he does. There's a few characters here that I want to specifically analyse, and one of the characters that I really want to analyse is Honey. So Honey as a character is someone who doesn't appear in the film for quite a long time. Honey takes like an hour to get into the film itself, which is fine because the film is 4 hours long and a lot of characters introduced throughout the film. In fact, the film itself is kind of like life. Characters and stories weave in and out of it. Some of them stay to the end, some of them leave the film. So it's a film where life itself kind of maps out how it's paced. So Honey turns up later on, but Honey's presence is felt from the very first instances of the film. Honey is someone who is talked about. Everyone has a story about him. He is a living legend to the children in A Brighter Summer Day. Honey is kind of their idol, their god, the man they worship. He is someone who has power. He is someone who can make or break the world. There's a sense that all this chaos at the beginning of A Brighter Summer Day would be fixed if only Honey were there. And so Honey provides all this power and weight to A Brighter Summer Day. And then he turns up, and we see how his quietness and the way he talks, even though he doesn't in any way be loud or authoritative, he commands authority. People listen to him. He can sit down in the corner and talk, and everyone respects what Honey has to say. Honey is a wise character. He mentions war and peace and draws parallels with that to his own existence. He's aware of the historical basis of the gang culture that he's in. And I think this kind of ties into something about A Brighter Summer Day in general, which is that the film itself draws on a very specific setting, but its story extends beyond that. And Honey himself is to acknowledge that his own existence is not just something that could be forged in 50s Taiwan, it's something that could be forged in a load of different settings. And so Honey is able to speak with this strong authority, and he proposes that the gang he commands is violent to get peace, that they crush the opposition, and not that they negotiate. And he's betrayed by other members of his gang who see peace and negotiation as the way to get everlasting harmony amongst the community. And so even though Honey is the only guy who's able to be his own, he's able to be his own authority. He doesn't stand still for the national anthem, he walks, he's able to be the only man who can move amongst the statues. He's able to be the guy who forges ahead. Honey is in the end betrayed by his own honour and his own pride, and that leads to his downfall. But then, just when we think peace is found, we find that it isn't truly found. There's a quieter chaos that ripples at the heart of A Brighter Summer Day. That is, until a purge in the typhoon, until blood runs down the street, until we hear screams in a darkened room, until we have the ultimate retribution of the gangs, and only after that violence does peace totally arrive in A Brighter Summer Day. So in the end, despite his downfall, Honey is still proven right. Like a god, he's never wrong. And that's another crucial aspect of A Brighter Summer Day. Honey is the guy that they idolise, especially the lead character. So, obviously the lead character in this film is struggling for identity. The film is about the aimless life of adolescence. It's about people who are young, trying to find their identity, trying to find who they are, and struggling to do so. And the lead character really struggles to find identity in this world. That's the appeal of gangs. Gangs provide an identity to a collective because then you're part of a group and you don't need to work on yourself. And that is what this is. And so for a film about adolescence and about an aimless life and about people who can't find themselves, that's what the gang culture in A Brighter Summer Day provides. And when the gang culture in the second half kind of vanishes, the film becomes instead just about identity, just about trying to find who you are. So the lead character has trouble finding who he is, and there's moments here where he almost does. There's a moment where he almost beats a man, but then instead saves him from a heart attack. It's little moments like this that define who we are. A few seconds earlier he was going to be a villain, but then he became a hero. And it's stuff like this that defines the identity and helps people find who they are. He slowly tries to discover exactly who he is, but he only finds superficiality in a lot of what he does. He witnesses his father's weakness. His father, who after the interrogation has his identity moulded into someone who's meek and quiet, and there's a smashed light bulb in the film which kind of represents the son's frustrations at his father's weakness. And in fact, the film becomes this whole thing about the lead trying to become who he wants to be. And eventually he shapes their identity based on Ming, based on the girl that he loves, which is very unfortunate because that in and of itself leads to lies and complications. We have to remember the lead in A Brighter Summer Day really cares about loyalty and honour, and so his relationship with Ming might define him, but any sign of weakness, of uncertainty, of betrayal will really shatter him. And that is basically how A Brighter Summer Day plays on this precipice of trying to uncover exactly how he will cope in this world. There's a line mentioned about how one's own efforts are the only things that can kind of change the future, but this is shown to not be true. We see how things outside of control shape the world we're in and shape our destinies. And so it seems inevitable in the end that the ending that we get in this film is the ending that we get. It's like fate. The moment earlier on when Ming accidentally almost shoots the lead character, and it's a miracle that he isn't killed. And that moment is seen as just a tiny moment, and it is. But it kind of defines that moment because it means that he didn't die. It's a miraculous avoidance of fate. And yet, it must be fate that he lived. And what happens to Ming towards the end of the film ultimately plays as fate. It is, in a way, the ultimate objectification. She has no control over her life. She is only a part of fate, which in and of itself is kind of a lead to this film. Ming is a fascinating character in A Brighter Summer Day. Her character is someone who suffers internally and someone who has a lot of pain. We see this in the screen test where she quietly cries. Ming is someone who also has a lot of boyfriends, a lot of affection, and so many boys shape their identity on their relationship with her. They're fools, but she allows this, and she becomes very fake. She becomes someone who is a lie. She allows herself to basically keep who she is and exert control on her life, but superficially alter just to keep herself happy, to keep the boys happy. And that kind of leads to her downfall, because she has created a world where people's identities depend on her being constant, and she is not constant. You can't tell if Ming's being truthful or Ming's being a liar. That is kind of the crux of the idea in A Brighter Summer Day. When we get to the fateful finale of the film, we have two people who don't want to change. We have Ming, who doesn't want to change because she's a passive observer who will change superficially only to suit the people around her. We have the lead character who learns he's won in a long line of boyfriends. His identity, which is solely based on his relationship with Ming, is not unique. He's just one person. He's just one person in a long line of people. He's the same as everyone else. There's a reason that the lead character rejects religion, because religion is just people who make up an identity based on a god. And he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to be a follower of God. He wants to be God. He wants to be the next Honey. Ming is an all-knowing character just like Honey is, but she kind of represents the world. She's someone who passively lets everything happen and changes with it. She's aware that everyone is ultimately the same, and she's aware that we will have people who will always do the exact same things and that generations will always play out the same way. She's very much aware of history and time in a way that no other character is. So this is a world where God has died and all we are left with is Ming, and Ming is someone who represents the world, and this is why the lead character wants to control her because he wants her to change, and neither of them will compromise. He sees her as disloyal and someone needs to change. So the lead character ends the film having lost his identity, having had an identity barely, kind of gained something and then losing it again. Because as is the crux of A Bright Summer Day, identity is in flux forever, and it's about people who cannot find who they truly are in this world. And the only reason he wants to change and control Ming is because he wants to be like Honey. He wants to be the god. He wants to be the person who has the ability to force change. He doesn't want to be someone who has nothing. And his reasons for this is because having nothing feels like what he already has. He feels like he has nothing because he doesn't know who he truly is. And to become who he truly is, he wants to have power because he thinks that will give him an identity. That is why the film does not end in a tragic, circumstance of unfortunate events. It ends in a moment of unapologetic, inevitable fate. It ends in a moment of, well, this had to come. Because in a world where life is this aimless, where children clap and live life because it's an obligation, not because they care, where children are brought up in a world where the generation above them is just as uncaring and just as lacking identity, this is what will happen. It's a film about identity forming into something that we don't want it to form into, and about identity forming in a fateful manner that only hurts all of us. It's about society falling apart, about a lack of cohesion, about the world as a platform to be crushed. And it's a very tragic film, rooted in truth and rooted in a genuine cinematic style that is epic. Just like how the main character turns lights on and off just so he can see what he can't see in the darkness. You need to see A Brighter Summer Day if you haven't already, just to believe how great a film it is. It is truly genius, it is long and epic, its themes are universal, it touches on everything that matters, and it's beautifully done. It might be 4 hours long, but it feels timeless. It feels like it goes on forever, and yet it doesn't feel long enough. It's a dense tale of love and suffering, and I totally recommend it to everyone. Have you seen A Brighter Summer Day? Because I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because it's one of my favourites and I would love to see what everyone else thinks. So please leave me a comment. If you'd like this review, please give it a like. If you want to hear more of my reviews, you can subscribe. If you want to read more of my reviews, you can follow me on Letterboxd or Twitter. Links in the description. And thank you for watching.